Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of This Week in Mappercraft. This past week was February 1st to February 7th. We'll be covering the years of 2016, 2018, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2025. As always, all information here can be found on the Mappercraft wiki, which is linked in the description of this video, along with the server itself. Let's go over the years. In 2016, the server was running Earthworld revived under Monsoon Jr. In 2018, the server was running Distorted Europe revived under Xenodyne. In 2020, the server was running Solus World 2 under Solus. In 2021, the server was running VMJ World under Multi. In 2021. In 2022, the server was running Brave New World under me, technically, MintyMichael. It was a bit complicated for this week, so we'll get into that later. Lastly, in 2025, the server was running Ramayana World, hosted by me, MintyMichael, as well. Let's get into it. First off, we have 4 events from February 1st to the 7th, 2016. First, on the 2nd, we have the dissolution of Ausonia following their massive victory against all the nations and players who destroyed the Tamil Empire. The nation was dissolved and their members scattered to one of the few nations that remained undestroyed, mostly Taiwan, which gained the territory of Madras as a colony. Here's the quote. Following that influx of players on the 3rd, Taiwan held elections, which lasted 24 hours, ending on the 4th. The parties were apparently the United Left Front, led by Shining Orange and K-Cap, the Socialist Left Party, led by Iron Hand, and the right-wing National Unity Party, led by the recent immigrants Extra and TL. Apparently, the United Left Front won on the 4th, although apparently also Multi won the presidency to the annoyance of the sitting president, Shining Orange. Here's the quote for that. Next, on the 5th, the Golden Alliance Toba War began, which is labeled as the Second Great War, although it didn't seem all that impactful for me based on my reading of the wiki. Apparently, Toba was a nation which quickly kind of expanded upon the ruins of all the destroyed nations and gained the ire of an alliance of nations which included Lapania, Namibia, and Persia. After an unknown griefer attacked Toba, which kicked off the war. It's not really stated who won, but I would assume that the Golden Alliance of multiple nations defeated the Toba since they basically acted alone. Here's the quote detailing the war, and that's the only information about this war on the wiki. Finally, on the 5th, after the disruptions in the Taiwanese election, we have the Taiwanese Civil War, where when it appeared that Multi would win the presidential election, Shining Orange, the sitting president, refused to give up power. Multi sought foreign support to press his claim, gathering forces from the Golden Alliance, who was fresh off their victory against Toba, and combining the formerly Tamil members of the National Unity Party with the Tamil Commonwealth remnant states. Multi won the battle by destroying Taiwan, but ultimately the war was basically a stalemate as Multi moved to Persia anyway. Taiwan collapsed, with Shining Orange getting angry, doing some debriefing, and eventually getting banned. There was apparently some debate about the legality of the war, since certain members of Taiwan, like Shining Orange, weren't originally online when the war kicked off. But ultimately nothing was done regarding this, and Taiwan was destroyed by infighting, making a bad sign for the fate of democracy on the server. Here's the quote about that. Kind of edited there. Next up, we have several events from February 1st to 7th, 2018 on Distorted Europe Revived. First, on the 4th, we have the Great London Fire, which may have been started by a griefer, but could have also just been an accident, since the griefer was never found, as seen by the quote here. Much of the city burned down, and it was definitely a major event towards the end of this world. Next, on the 5th, possibly related to the Great London Fire, all governments were declared abolished by the King of Poland, Dan, after major griefs are discovered in several cities where the inhabitants had gone inactive. This event probably directly contributed to the ending of the world the next week. Finally, on the 6th, definitely related to the previous day's events, we had a major griefing incident where Mitch and Doomshroom attacked and griefed Istra and Berlin, creating a massive cobble monster around Spawn. They were subsequently banned for the rest of the world for this, although this basically acted as a send-off for the world, similar to the end of the World War, which happened on some previous worlds. Here's the quote detailing this, they were definitely banned for a good amount of time. I'm not really sure how that turned out, as both of them eventually did come back later in 2018. But for now, it was a bit of a deal. Next up, we have two events from February 1st to the 7th, 2020, during Solus World 2. On the 2nd, the server went down due to some internal issues, probably related to updating the server last week. Here's the quote. Then, on 5 days later, the server went back up, having updated to the latest version of Minecraft. Bit surprising, this event here, but ultimately had a good ending. The server was able to quickly turn around and update after going down unexpectedly just a few days before. That's the only event for this week, though, since the server was down for most of the week. So, yeah, it's just those two. Server going down, server coming back online, updated to 1.15. Next up, we have two pretty important events from February 1st to the 7th, 2021 during VMJ World. First, on the 5th, California declared war on Yamatai, the nation which was Japan, representing sort of a Pacific conflict. However, shortly after the war was declared, California surrendered and got annexed by Yamatai. Following this, it was eventually revealed that this was all a stage, part of a long-term plan to eventually sort of challenge Rome for international dominance. Roman leaders and citizens made extremely loud protests at this, understandably, and Yamatai was forced to take a 100% neutral stance on all international affairs, basically pulling them away from the international community. Here's the quote on that. And next up, on the 6th, we have the Vinlandic-Maracaiban War, where Maracaibo declared war on Vinland in an attempt to get one of their members, Czech Dago, to stop raiding them. Additionally, the nation wanted to show off its power, as Maracaibo was experiencing a bit of a surge in growth. Dago was previously a member of Maracaibo, but had been kicked out due to sort of inciting conflict in the nation and fighting with their leaders. After moving into position, a small Maracaiban force declared war and quickly invaded the main Vinlandic settlement, doing small damage, particularly to the house of Dago. The citizens of Vinland quickly got off the server and contacted Chiefess J to negotiate a surrender, and as a result of this, Dago was exiled to Rome. The war was met with heavy criticism internationally, particularly from Rome, the leading player at the time, who had chosen to host the exiled Dago. Observers were stunned by the abruptness of the attack and failure to consider diplomacy on Maracaibo's part. Additionally, the Vinlandic civilians suffered greatly from the temporary occupation of their nation, fearing for their lives and their property. Big Vinny, the leader or monarch of Maracaibo, issued an apology on behalf of the government, and some of the damages were repaired by the members of the Maracaiban force on their exit from Vinland. Relations between the two nations eventually returned to a more neutral position, although internationally, people didn't really like Maracaibo a lot after this. Here's the quote about that, and you can read a lot more about this war on their specific wiki page, linked in the description. It's a pretty interesting one. Next up, we have two minor events from February 1st to the 7th, 2022, during the final days of Brave New World. On the 31st of January, 2022, last week, I had abdicated from the host position, so technically the server was without an owner for this week. The main events here were that, on the 3rd, the server didn't go down as scheduled. I thought that the billing period ended on the 3rd of each month, but I guess I was wrong, as the server just kind of stayed up. Here's the quote. However, just a few days later, on the 6th, the billing period actually ended and Brave New World closed for good. Here's the rather limited quote about that. Not really anything interesting there, just the closing of the world with that. Finally, on February 1st to the 7th of 2025, last year, we have two minor events during the last month of Ramayana World. On the 1st, the Great Mountain War occurred between Grimglor and the Republic of Himalaya. This was the only war to use a highly loose version of the war rules, which basically just counted kind of kills and occupation of an area, which was heavily up to staff interpretation and discretion. The war occurred due to a dispute regarding the mountain range, which is known as the Himalayas in real life. The Republic of Himalaya used that IRL name, while the nation of Grimglor called it the Grimalayas instead. After several nations moved to support Grimglor, the Himalayas sued for peace, and the two nations were combined into the Empire of Grimalaya, and the mountain range was subsequently renamed. The amount of actual conflict was very limited in this war, as the Himalayan forces quickly surrendered, facing down a big coalition of sort of remaining active nations in the world. Here's the quote for that, though. Also on the 1st, several nations were disbanded for inactivity again. This would be the last time this would happen on this world, as the server mostly kind of went inactive for the next month or so. Both Constantium and Syurga, major players at the beginning of the world, lost several settlements, leaving them shells of their former selves. Here's the quote, which uses the name Sundering, which several players made up to refer to this. I don't really like this name, so I don't use it, but it became popular at the time. And this marks the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and check out the server at the link in the description. We're about to launch a new world this week. As always, if you have any additional information about any of these events, leave a comment down below or go ahead and add it to the Mappercraft wiki. See you next week for the second week of February, February 8th through the 14th.